Hello, my darlings. I'm sorry I've been away for a little bit with all of the fiasco that was going on this last couple of weeks. I was not able to finish The Baron, but I think we may finish The Baron tonight, so we've got that going on. We'll talk about that when we get there. Um, you may notice I'm not wearing the wig because my friend Chad Edward Lee Everett, my very dear friend, he wanted so badly to go out in all Rococo, Baroque, 18th century finery. And he said, "Oh, but I want you to go out. Please go out with me." So I did. And then, the little trickster that he is, I hope you can hear me. Can everyone hear? I don't know if they can hear me or not. Anyway, if you can hear me, let me know that you can hear me. I'm trying the microphone. I don't know that you can hear me. But anyway, my friend Chad Edward Lee Everett, he took my wig and he is having it styled by my friend Lisa. So it was very, very generous and very sweet because it looked like it was in a windmill, that lovely wig. So I have a couple of options for you, my darlings. We are probably going to finish The Baron tonight. We have, oh goodness, it looks like only one chapter. So I'm going to post a poll. We'll talk about it. Now I'm going to show you some books. These are some that I have. First and foremost, I'm going to talk about Hell Up to Date. Now, this one is actually available on Patreon. You can see, I mean, it's not, my audio, oh, my audio is muffled. Let me see. Let me try this one. Let me, you can hear me. Can you hear me better now? Is that better? I don't know if that is better or not, but,
Give them a minute to answer. No, that's a strong one.
can you turn the fan off? It might be the fan. Is this any better? It's worse? Ah, yeah, it was the fan.
It was worse when you took that out.
Okay. Is that better? Audio is better now? Ah, good. Okay, now I'm going to sit here and be a little bit warm. It's a good thing we only have one chapter tonight. So here's the deal. On Patreon, I was reading Hell Up to Date, and it's sort of a modern, by the standards of 19th century, adaptation of Dante's Inferno, the Divine Comedy. So that one is available on Patreon. I haven't finished that book either. So, you know, for my Patreon fans, I will finish that one if there's more interest. Right now, there's not very much interest in that one. However, the next books I've decided to read. Now, it's completely up to you or me. I don't know, it's mostly up to me. But it makes you feel like there might be a chance. So I don't know which one I want to read. So this one is The Doctor and the Devil. This is an 1890s copy. And from what I understand, you know what, maybe I could read a little excerpt from it and see maybe. Oh yeah, my postcards are there. So, I'm going to just read just a little. In February of 1892, I was conducting a detective agency at number 287 Broadway. The agents of Dr. Parkhurst Society, not having been enabled for some reason or another, probably incompetency to help Dr. Parkhurst out of the awkward position his sermon had placed him in, the late David J. Whitney, then a commission merchant at number 47 Warren Street and a prominent worker in the ranks of Society for the Prevention of Crime, wrote, asking me to call upon him. The letter was entirely unsolicited and was rather of a surprise to me, although I had known Mr. Whitney prior to the writing of the letter and had been engaged by him in looking up other cases aside from the Society for the Prevention of Crime matters. Mr. Whitney wrote me as follows. So that's just one little excerpt. But from what I gather, The Doctor and the Devil is about this man who ends up by encountering, the Prince of Darkness. So that's a fun one. The other one is a fictional book too. This was a gift from a very dear friend, and it is Asmodeus, or Asmodeus, as I like to say when we do the puppet show. Now this is also a fiction book, but it is, let me see, memoir of the author. These are both around the 1890s, so, you know, a little choice there for you. Dialogue 1. It is all over with me, my dear neighbour. I am quite ruined. The lairs my protecting gods now freeze by my hearth, and chillness seizes me from head to foot. B. I am startled at what you tell me. How has this terrible disease been produced? How comes it you are suddenly changed from hot to cold? For I have constantly seen you all afire. A. Alas, I must of necessity follow the destiny of my friend the scholar and the poor man. So anyway, that's a dialogue between Asmodeus and the other. So you can leave in your comment section down below what you would like for me to read. Either you can do Asmodeus or The Devil and the Doctor. Of course, it's because it features my lovely friends, the marionettes, and my friend the Devil and Asmodeus over there. I love them so much. Oh, hello, Paul. Lovely to see you. Oh, there's one vote for Asmodeus. Yes, I think that's probably a very good idea. I do enjoy both. I do intend to read both, so it's a lot of fun. I guess I should start though by reading Baron Munchausin. Before I do though, this is Blue Willow. I love, these are not my good ones, but I love this pattern. Speaking of Baron, because this pattern was designed in 1790 in England, so even though it's my favorite pattern, it really works quite well with, it works quite well. My name is Felix. Hello, Felix. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to have my tea. I wish you were here to enjoy it. It's so delicious. I have a little vanilla. I have a little Earl Grey. I have a little chocolate. And it's a smattering of honey and a little milk. It's so delicious. Well, I suppose, what?
You can show them that.
Oh, well, this one is, we sort of, in this household, we have sort of the china that we always use. So I typically will either use this cup. Ironically, I don't know why that particular cup, but I use that cup most frequently. Though I have other ones that have a beautiful geisha girl on the bottom. I have other patterns. I have ones with bats, and I have ones that are, you know, from the 20s and some that are from the 50s, but still, I don't know why that's my favorite. However, my dear friend, Lady Alexandra, she uses this pattern, and I don't know if you can see it, but it says, "I could poison you." So I have one. I was given one that says, "Oh, you are tedious," but and it's neat. I love it. I just find myself gravitating more towards the 1790 set. More tea. I do wish you could enjoy this with me. It is so delicious. I'll pour some right over here.
Thank you.
Now, one more sip of tea, and then we can begin, as the case were. All right, my darlings. Yes. So where we left off with the Baron is that he was cutting a canal through, I guess, I don't remember now where.
America still?
I think he was still in the United States. I don't remember. Stick around because I have some discussion. Oh, you know what? Let's do it now. I don't care. So the thing is, when he meets the President of the United States, he actually meets George Washington. So that sets some things into motion. You know, it's nearly 200 years old, this book, and so a lot of things have changed. But the Baron, of course, is one of emancipation, excepting for Native Americans, and he was not too kind to natives. Other than that, it's a different time. I think without further ado, my beauties, I really am excited to read the final because I'll tell you a little bit when we get there. Chapter 33rd. Seized with fury of canal cutting, I took it in my head to form an immediate communication between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, and therefore set out for Petersburg. The sanguinary ambition of the Empress would not listen to my proposal until I took a private opportunity, taking a cup of coffee with Her Majesty, to tell her that I would absolutely sacrifice myself for the general good of mankind. And if they would accede my why did it say that? And if they would accede to my proposal, would on the completion of the canal, ipso facto, give her my hand in marriage. My dear Baron, said she, I accede to everything you please, and agree to make peace with the Porte on the conditions you mentioned, and, added she, rising with all the majesty of Tsarina, Empress of half the world, be it known to all the subjects that we ordain these conditions, for such is our royal will and pleasure. I now proceeded to Isthmus for Suez, at the head of 1,000,000 of Russian pioneers, and there united my forces with 1,000,000 of Turks armed with shovels and pickaxes. They did not come to cut each other's throats, but for their mutual interest to facilitate commerce and civilization, and pour all the wealth of India by a new channel into Europe. My brave fellows, said I, consider the immense labor of the Chinese to build their celebrated wall. Think of what superior benefit to mankind is our present undertaking. Persevere, and fortune will second your endeavors. Remember, it is Munchausin who leads you on, and be convinced of success. Saying these words, I drove my chariot with all my might in my former tracks, that vestige mentioned by Baron de Tort. And when I was advanced considerably, I felt my chariot sinking under me. I attempted to drive on, but the ground, or rather immense vault, giving way my chariot, and all went down precipitously. Stunned by the fall, I was some moments before I could recollect myself. When at length, to my amazement, I perceived myself fallen into the Alexandrian Library, overwhelmed in the ocean of books, thousands of volumes came tumbling on my head amid the ruins of that part of the vault through which my chariot had descended, and for a time buried my bulls and beneath a heap of learning. However, I contrived to extricate myself, and advanced with awful admiration through the vast avenues of the library. I perceived on every side innumerable volumes and repositories of ancient learning, and all the science of the antediluvian world. Here I met with Hermes Trismegistus and a parcel of old philosophers debating upon the politics and learning of their days. I gave them inexpressible delight in telling them in a few words all the discoveries of Newton and the history of the world since their time. These gentry, on the contrary, told me 1,000 stories of antiquity that some of our antiquarians would give their very eyes to hear. In short, I ordered the library to be preserved, and I intend making a present of it as soon as it arrives in England, to the Royal Society, together with Hermes Trismegistus and 6 old philosophers. I have got a beautiful cage made in which I keep these extraordinary creatures and feed them with bread and honey, as they seem to believe in kind of a doctrine of transmigration, and will not touch flesh. Hermes Trismegistus especially is a most antique-looking being, with a beard 1/2 yard long, covered with a robe of golden embroidery, and prates like a parrot. He will cut a very brilliant figure in the museum. Having made a track with my chariot from the sea to sea, I ordered my Turks and Russians to begin, and in a few hours we had the pleasure of seeing a fleet of British East Indiamen in full sail through the canal. The officers of this fleet were very polite and paid me every applause and congratulation my exploits could merit. They told me of their affairs in India, and the ferocity of that dreadful warrior, Tippoo Sahib, on which I resolved to go to India and encounter the tyrant. I travelled down the Red Sea to Madras, and at the head of a few sepoys and Europeans pursued the flying army of Tippoo to the gates of Seringapatam. I challenged him to mortal combat, and mounted on my steed, rode up to the walls of the fortress amid a storm of shells and cannonballs. As fast as the bombs and cannonballs came upon me, I caught them in my hands like so many pebbles, and throwing them against the fortress, demolished the strongest ramparts of the place. I took my mark so direct that whenever I aimed a cannonball or shell at any person on the ramparts, I was sure to hit him. And one time, perceiving a tremendous piece of artillery pointed against me, and knowing the ball must be so great it would certainly stun me, I took a small cannonball, and just as I perceived the engineer going to order them to fire, and opening his mouth to give the word of command, I took aim and drove my ball precisely down his throat. Tippoo, fearing that all would be lost, that a general and successful storm would ensue if I continued to batter the place, came forth upon his elephant to fight me. I saluted him, and insisted he should fire first. Tippoo, though a barbarian, was not deficient in politeness, and declined the compliment, upon which I took off my hat, and bowing, told him it was the advantage of Munchausin should never be said to accept from so gallant a warrior, on which Tippoo instantly discharged his carbine, the ball from which, hitting my horse's ear, made him plunge with rage and indignation. In return, I discharged my pistol at Tippoo, and shot off his turban. He had a small field piece mounted with him on his elephant, which he then discharged at me, and the grape shot coming in a shower rattled in the laurels that covered the shade and shaded me all over, and I remained pendant like berries on branches. I then, advancing, took the proboscis of his elephant, and turning it against the rider, struck him repeatedly with the extremity of it on either side of the head, until I, at length, dismounted him. Nothing could equal the rage of the barbarian on finding himself thrown from his elephant. He rose in a fit of despair, and rushed against my steed and myself, and scorned to flight him at so great a disadvantage on his side, and directly dismounted to fight him, hand to hand, never to fight with any man who bore himself more nobly than this adversary. He parried my blows, and dealt home his own in return with astonishing precision. The first blow of his sabre I received upon the bridge of my nose, and, but for the bony firmness of that part of my face, it would have descended to my mouth. I still bear the mark upon my nose. The next made a furious blow at my head, but I, parrying, deadened the force of his sabre, so that I received but one scar on my forehead, and at the same instant, by a blow of my sword, cut off his arm and his hand, and the sabre fell to the earth. He tottered for some paces, and dropped at the foot of his elephant. The sagacious animal, seeing the danger of his master, endeavoured to protect him by flourishing his proboscis around the head of the Sultan. Fearless, I advanced against the elephant, desirous to take alive the haughty Tippoo Sahib, but he drew a pistol from his belt and discharged it full in my face as I rushed upon him, which did me no further harm than wound my cheekbone, which disfigures me somewhat under my left eye. I could not withstand the rage and impulse of that moment, and with one blow of my sword separated his head from his body. I returned overland from India to Europe with admirable velocity to the account of Tippo's defeat by me has not yet arrived by the ordinary passage, nor can you expect to hear it for a considerable time. I simply relate the encounter as it happened between the Sultan and me, and if there be anyone who doubts the truth of what I say, he is an infidel, and I will fight him at any time and place and with any weapon he pleases. Hearing so many persons talk about raising the Royal George, I began to take pity on that fine old ruin of British plank, and determined to have her up. I was sensible of failure of the various means hitherto employed for the purpose, and therefore inclined to try a method different from any before attempted. I got an immense balloon made of the toughest sailcloth, and having descended in my diving bell and properly secured the hull with enormous cables, I ascended to the surface and fastened my cables to the balloon. Prodigious multitudes were assembled to behold the elevation of the Royal George, and as soon as I began to fill my balloon with inflatable air, the vessel evidently began to move. But when my balloon was completely filled, she carried up the Royal George with the greatest rapidity. The vessel, appearing on the surface, occasioned a universal shout of triumph from the millions assembled on the occasion. Still, the balloon continued ascending, trailing the hull after like a lantern at the tail of a kite, and in a few minutes appeared floating among the clouds. It was then the opinion of many philosophers that it would be more difficult to get her down than it had been to draw her up, but I convinced them to the contrary, by taking aim so exactly with 12-pounder that I brought her down in an instant. I considered that if I should break the balloon with the cannonball, while she remained with the vessel over the land, the fall would inevitably occasion the destruction of the hull, and which, in its fall, might crush some of the multitude. Therefore, I thought it safer to take my aim when the balloon was over the sea, and pointing my 12-pounder, drove the ball right through the balloon, on which the inflatable air rushed out with great force, and the Royal George descended like a falling star into the very spot from whence she had been taken. There she still remains, but I have convinced all of Europe of the possibility of taking her up. Chapter 34. Passing through Switzerland on my return from India, I was informed that several of the German nobility had been deprived of the honours and immunities of their French estates. I heard of the sufferings of the amiable Marie Antoinette, and swore to avenge every look that had threatened her with insult. I went to the cavern of the anthropophagi assembled to debate, and gracefully, putting the hilt of my sword to my lips, I swear, I cried, by the sacred cross of my sword, that if you do not instantly reinstate your king and his nobility, and your injured queen, I will cut the one half of you to pieces. On which the president, taking up the leaden inkstand, flung it at my head. I stooped to avoid the blow, and rushing to the tribunal, seized the speaker, who was fulminating against the aristocrats, and taking the creature by one leg, flung him at the president. I laid about me most nobly, drove them all out of the house, and locking the doors, put the key in my pocket. I then went to the poor king, and making my obeisance to him, Sire, said I, your enemies have all fled. I alone am the National Assembly at present, and I shall register your edicts to recall the princes and the nobility, and in the future of your majesty, if your majesty pleases, I will be your parliament and council. He thanked me, and the amiable Marie Antoinette, smiling, gave me her hand to kiss. At that moment I perceived a party of the National Assembly, who had rallied with the National Guard and the vast procession of fishwomen.
Can we try to put the mic in again? They're saying there's a microphone disruption of some kind.
I don't know why it's doing that.
as if it was being covered, like a cell phone breaks up with bad reception, or a bad reception.
How is this? Can you hear me? Is this a good one? Thumbs up?
The video hasn't gotten to the point where you asked that yet for them.
Is this better?
Amy says it was crackling, and yes, it is better.
Thank you. At the moment I perceived a party of the National Assembly, and had rallied with the National Guards and vast precision of fishwomen advancing against me. I deposited their majesties in a place of safety, and with my drawn sword advanced against my foes. 300 fishwomen, with bushes dressed with ribbon in their hands, came hallooing and roaring against me like so many furies. I scorned to defile my sword with their blood, but seized the first that came up, and making her kneel down, knighted her with my sword, which so terrified the rest that they set up a frightful yell, and ran away as fast as they could for fear of being aristocrated by knighthood. As to the National Guards and the rest of the assembly, I soon put them to flight, and having made prisoners of some of them, compelled them to take down their national, and put the old royal cockade in its place. I then pursued the enemy to the top of the hill, where a most noble edifice dazzled my sight. Noble and sacred it was, but now converted to the vilest purposes, their monument du Grand Homme, a Christian church that sacrants had perverted into abomination. I burst open the doors, and entered sword in hand. Here I observed all the National Assembly marching round a great altar erected to Voltaire. There was his statue in triumph, and the fishwomen with their garlands decking it and singing. I don't know what that French word is. Sarira. I could bear the sight no longer, but rushed upon these pagans and sacrificed them by dozens upon the spot. The members of the assembly and the fishwomen continued to invoke their great Voltaire and all their masters in this moment de grand homme, imploring them to come down and successor them against the aristocrats and the sword of Munchausin. Their cries were horrible, like the shrieks of witches and enchantresses versed in magic and in the black art. While the thunder growled and storms shook the battlements, and the Rousseau, Voltaire, and Beelzebub appeared, 3 horrible spectres, one all meagre, mere skin and bone and cadaverous seemed death. That hideous skeleton, it was Voltaire, and in his hands were a lyre and a dagger. On the other hand was Rousseau, with a chalice of sweet poison in his hand, and between them was their father, Beelzebub. I shuddered at the sight, and with all the enthusiasm of rage, horror, and piety, rushed in among them. I seized that cursed skeleton, Voltaire, and soon compelled him to renounce all the errors he had advanced, and while he spoke the words, as if by magic charm, the whole assembly shrieked, and their pandemonium began to tumble in hideous ruin on their heads. I returned in triumph to the palace, where the queen rushed into my arms, weeping tenderly. "Ah, thou flower of nobility," cried she, "were all the nobles of France like thee, we should never have been brought to this." I bade the lovely creature dry her eyes, and with the king and the dauphin ascend my carriage, and drive post to Montmedy, as not an instant was to be lost. They took my advice and drove away. I conveyed them within a few miles of Montmedy, when the king, thanking me for my assistance, hoped that I would not trouble myself any further, as he was then presumed out of danger, and the queen also, with tears in her eyes, thanked me on her knees, and presented the dauphin for my blessing. In short, I left the king eating a mutton chop. I advised him not to delay, or he would certainly be taken, and setting spurs to my horse, wished them a good evening, and returned to England. If the king remained too long at the table, and was taken, it was not my fault. So a little historical context here. There was a real Baron Munchausin of Germany, And he was known in the time for telling very tall, exaggerated tales. There is, of course, some imperialism, which is not to be taken lightly. On a positive note, throughout the story, he talks about with his great chariot and Gog and Magog. That is, this is the Age of Enlightenment, by the way. So Gog and Magog actually represent the kingdoms against God, which is funny that he goes in and slays pagans and witches. So this whole story was written as an apology for the beheading of Marie Antoinette and Louis. So that was what that was about. So it was a long way to go about it. Now I know this might be silly to some of you, but I remember the 18th century. I remember France. I was there. And it is not a time I would like to go back and revisit. Though some of the things are beautiful, we are most certainly in the best of times. I mean, here we are together, enjoying tea, and you're watching at home and in your pajamas, or you're at work, maybe, get to work, and I'm drinking this wonderful tea. So, contextual, historical things. These other books, Asmodeus and The Doctor and the Devil, these are 100 years in the future from this. So instead of 1790, it's 1890. And the 1890s I like to refer to as the gay 90s, not just me, lots of people do. It was really an age of invention and excess. It was really quite lovely. 3:30 a.m. insomnia served me well. Well, I'm so glad that I could keep you company with your insomnia. My evening gig, by the way, for those of you who recall the Beetle House, I do enjoy it. It's a host. Yes, the gay 90s, it was known as the gay 90s because in those days gay meant happy. Yes, thank you. Anyway, so the gay 90s was that, but I went off on a tangent and I forgot where I was going. But nonetheless, I'm glad that you are here. I'm glad that I'm here. Beetle House, yes. So my evening gig, I have this MC gig. I enjoy it. It sort of fulfills my performing quota when I'm not filming for you in YouTube. I do have some wonderful news, which I'm going to tell you in the upcoming video. So that's kind of the good thing there. If you are enjoying this channel, I appreciate all of the Patreons. You can go there. It's like a cup of coffee a month or something. It's not really a lot of money, but it really helps me out tremendously. It helps me to continue doing these great videos for you. I don't know when we're going to start doing the free reading Fridays. I might have to change it to Monday, which I don't know. I don't have a rhyme for that. I don't know. I don't know. That's just
Tarot Tuesday.
No, because we're reading on Tuesdays. I don't know. Tea and Tarot Tuesdays, that's fun, but that's every day for me. At any rate, my beauties, I guess that was the end of the book. So those of you who are up at 3:30 in the morning, go to bed. Thank you, everyone, for enjoying and for joining in. And thank you for all the likes, shares, and comments. Love you. Good night. Good night.